BNP Paribas Wealth Management is proud to partner with the entrepreneurs on Monocle Radio. Confronted by complexity, you need a financial partner you can trust that will protect your assets and strive to meet your expectations. BNP Paribas Wealth Management is the bank for entrepreneurs in a changing world. Head to wealthmanagement.bnp Paribas now for guidance on starting your journey. Hello and welcome to The Entrepreneurs on Monocle Radio, the show all about inspiring people, innovative companies and fresh ideas in global business. On today's programme, we're riding into the future in style with the creator of a groundbreaking new cycling helmet that's inflatable.
This helmet, because of the fabric and the way that the chambers sit, it ventilates rather than reflects heat back in. And so what you get is a conductive cooling over the head. And this is where the pro cycle teams have been very interested as a kind of next chapter for us.
And later, just in time for some last-minute Christmas shopping, we'll hear about the smartest gift in the world, in our humble opinion.
This year we wanted to add a little extra gift with your subscription to really help you plot and plan for the year ahead.
This is The Entrepreneurs, with me, Tom Edwards. You're listening to The Entrepreneurs. Colin Herpoger is the co-founder and CEO of Fontet, a British design company that makes products for contemporary movement and is behind the world's first inflatable cycle helmet. 10 years in development, the Fontet AH1 helmet features a triple-layered ballistics material that's puncture-proof and offers deep impact absorption. Colin stopped by Midori House to give us a demonstration of how it works. I began by asking him if, in his view, the Fontet helmet represents the future of cycling safety.
We found it very interesting for the last 10 years looking at safety performance and impact performance and trying to understand concussion and brain injury, such an important thing that everybody's thinking about. A typical cycle helmet is using a sort of foam material, impacting, it can compress. And we were wondering, if you had a compression system that had a much deeper depth of impact absorption, I think it could be a lot safer. And so, as well as coming from, obviously, from a design background, who was very interested in the pairing between this sort of extreme safety performance in outerwear, in helmet, but also beyond, looking at that now, and also aesthetic and how people sort of feel confident as they move throughout their day. And I think that movement, the sort of foundational central principle behind what we're doing is movement, both in terms of product, in the sort of movement from 2D to 3D is a kind of conceptual challenge that we've been very interested in. But then also just, in our day-to-day life, how do we move? And that kind of goes back to performance objects, but also objects of desire and style. And, people like Izzy Miyake is sort of interesting, making clothing for movement, rather than for the hanger. And I think this is a way that we think a lot about how we go about our day. And it's just really exciting seeing, a transition from, we can, of course, in London here, take the tube or the train or taxi or things. But now more and more, of course, cycling has always been a fairly somewhat popular sport. But now its emergence is just everywhere. Of course, the scooter as well. But seeing people hopping off and on bikes rather than choosing to take a taxi or a bus is another option there. And I think that how you move from meeting friends or whatever it might be, going for a drink, there's a desire to feel good, look good, and just be confident, in terms of your safety, of course, but also aesthetically and how you communicate yourself, I think is something that we've always been really interested in.
And there's so many attendant challenges to designing safety apparel as well, because of this very, very rigorous, understandably high level of scrutiny and safety certification. But just to go back to that point you made about sort of almost dynamic design in a more abstract sense, Colin, do you think that sometimes there is an issue that we don't factor in the dynamism to certain design objects, and it's like, oh, this gal is a good designer, so let's have them turn their attention to this object or this challenge, and we don't think about that dynamism enough, maybe, or in the correct way. Sometimes that we lacking being a bit more sort of joined up in almost on the theoretical side almost.
Yeah, potentially. It's quite interesting getting into safety products as a first product for Fontet. perhaps not even something that you might recommend because of the extensive certification process. But in fact, that's actually been one of the most interesting, helpful parts about what we've done. We've been working on it for 10 years, and that's because it is very difficult to innovate through safety standards, particularly when you're protecting your head. And going through it on the other end, really appreciate why it is so stringent and so rigorous, because you have, your most important asset is your brain and your ability to think. And so if anywhere that you want to take care of, it's that. And so in doing so, you also come to understand why innovation can be slower in a certain area like that. We often talk in the studio, if we were making trainers, we'd have sort of be on about our 14th version by now, and have quite an extensive brand. But it's been very interesting working within the parameters of what is, I think we think of as quite a boring industry of safety, but bringing a relevance and a technological advancement to it, purely performative, or performance-based, but then also being highly conscious of confidence in terms of aesthetic and pushing brand and association and desirability forwards for not just product. I mean, product is one, it's fine, but just generally a sort of sense of movement. I think we find it quite exciting thinking about how are people excited by movement and just getting out there and doing stuff and enjoying the day. And I think this is one of the things that I really love about the sort of parallel invention of the electric bike. I'm a quite keen cyclist, and I'm with other guys in the office who are cycling all the time and really into cycling, but also the putting a motor on a bike has made it really fun and quite accessible. And you get, if you were older, it might be sort of intimidating riding a bike, and now it's quite easy and quite fun, and you can get further and you're sweating less. And there's a nice enjoyment that's been a sort of residual of invention in a way, or an appropriation of a technology, a motor, electric motor onto a bicycle. And I think the consideration of Von Tet, it's been fairly interesting because 10 years ago when we started, there wasn't electric bikes, and there wasn't, there was the first Boris bikes coming out in London, and there was a kind of hardcore cyclist tribe, weekend warrior that has existed for a while, but there wasn't so much spontaneous transportation on a two-wheeled manner. And I think an interesting aspect of invention is you're constantly thinking about where is culture going? Where might it be? And also the hope is to inspire and to lead such culture. And I don't think we anticipated it taking 10 years at the beginning, but it's very intriguing to see at the same time that the helmet is now ready and sort of comes out to the market, how culture has progressed and actually landed at a very sort of similar, simultaneous position. And it could have been exactly the opposite, but I think my training and background is architecture. I moved to London to do a PhD in architecture at Bartlett's UCL. And I was always incredibly inspired by the Bartlett. I studied in Canada, did a master's degree there, and was teaching architecture in Canada. And the Bartlett and UCL were always a sort of place of highest aspiration and conceptual leadership, both within the industry of architecture, but more importantly within the provocation of thought of how culture moves forwards within design. And I thought they were really leading it, so I wanted to be a part of it. So I came over and luckily got accepted to do a PhD in their design course, which I think at that time was just taking 6 people a year. Now it's expanded a bit. The interest in it was to come and be around the most interesting people at the top level that weren't trying to copy others. Or this was my theory of thinking in it, perhaps naive even from a distance, but I was very curious to learn how to participate at that level. I think in a sort of rural area in Canada, you're inspired to do things to a top level, but you don't necessarily have the exposure at that point yet in your career. You're doing a lot of stuff off your own back, but moving here and coming and understanding that side of it became really interesting. Yeah, towards, actually, the contribution might be able to inspire this idea of confidence within movement.
It's super interesting. I think that idea of this very, very long process, product development-wise, I think in safety product is not that long, but as you said, in some other more mass market consumer products, 10 years, people would be like, you must be crazy. But how fascinating the idea that culture catches up with the idea that was an abstraction at the beginning. That is super, super interesting, but perhaps one to interrogate on another day. Let's talk a little bit about the product. Can I grab it?
Yeah, definitely.
Now, it's incredible. I don't know, this is the challenge. Use your words, Colin, to describe what I have here in my hands. Tell me how this thing works.
It's a helmet that, I mean, conceptually from the beginning, the thinking was to have a helmet that could go from 3-dimensional as you wear it down to 2D and just fit in your pocket, as you know, conceptually as a slice of paper or a piece of paper folding down. So the helmet has a number of chambers that has a sort of high pressurized, uses a ballistics family of material, triple layered. So it's fully cut, puncture proof, everything. It's like, I mean, it's really good. Push on it from end to end, like as hard as you can. It's just, you can't.
I would jump up and down. I would jump up and down on it, but I'm not going to do that because I'm in my chair. But it's rigid.
Yeah. And so how can you make this thing that is both 3-dimensionally desirable, but also incredibly high performance within a very thin cavity depth that you have in a helmet? You know, every helmet wants to be as thin and sexy as possible.
Because it is very light. I don't know what the gram weightage of it is.
It is. It's sort of typical, the same weight class as all the other like high-end performance helmets. Yeah. Our next version that's coming out, we hope, is going to be the lightest helmet on the market. So we're quite excited about that. We've got a few adaptations in it. We've spoken with a few pro cycle teams already about it, because one of the great aspects that we get with the helmet is typically a regular helmet is made of a sort of polystyrene type material, and that material it's fairly light, so it's quite good. But one of its deficiencies is it's quite bad for making you hot. You know, the heat is trying to leave your head and it gets reflected back down. You know, it's the same material that's in a beer cooler, let's say. You know, it's incredibly a very good thermal barrier. Whereas this helmet, because of the fabric and the way that the chambers sit off of the head, it ventilates rather than reflects heat back in. And so what you get is a conductive cooling over the head. And this is where the pro cycle teams have been very interested as a kind of next chapter for us. Because if you can keep the heat staying out of the red zone when you're riding that's what everyone's flirting with the whole time. And so if we can help them do that, it's been incredibly significant.
Now, I'm fortunate. I have the kind of finished product in my hands, but you also have an equally elegant little pouch and a small device that looks sort of like, I don't know, it looks a bit like one of those, it looks like a vape. Can you assemble, or I don't know, what's the word? Is it to inflate? What's your terminology that you use, Colin, in terms of getting this ready?
Yeah, inflate is fine. You see, it's, I mean, you don't see over the radio, but it's sort of 2/3 the size of a laptop, volumetrically smaller than a laptop. Here, you see. Comes inside the case, comes out.
It looks like a big banana. in its resting form.
Yeah, a little bit thinner, hopefully.
Yeah.
So it comes, and we've been really proud of our IP portfolio that we've developed. We've got, I think it's 27 patents granted and held by the company now, and they are things like the structural system, but also one of the important parts is this pressure indicator system. So it's very easy to use. So when you inflate with air, there's a line that comes up in the middle, and then you're at correct pressure. Correct riding pressure.
And presumably, again, that must be one of the things from a safety standpoint, that the efficacy of that specific system, that indicator, I mean, there's rigors that must go into proving that to a satisfactory level.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, it's really important to know that you're at correct user application, and then on another hand, it's also equally important that it's just very easy to use and very smooth. So those are the two parallel pieces, and the pump valve system is a Presta valve, just like on a bike. So the electric pump you're talking about that looks like a vape, that one, it's made for your bike tire, so it goes to 125 psi. It alone retails for about £110, so it's the best one. And we thought it was important, along with the helmet, to always have the best experience through and through. So that's why we've made a partnership with them. But yeah, I'm very happy to
let's do
an inflation here and show it to you. So you just simply put the head over top, and on it goes, and there we go.
I mean, that is quite extraordinary. And that's, in a way, people can hear it, but to see that and the speed of that is pretty extraordinary. Yeah. So you mentioned if you were making I use air quotes, normal consumer product, you'd be on maybe the 14th variation. I'm sure people listening, Colin, will just say, I'm sure he said 10 years. How does that actually work then, in terms of your time, the application of resource, the fact that, all of these different complicated stakeholders, the number of rounds, How does that work from a business standpoint? Because it must fry people's minds to think of it.
It is really fascinating. It's quite interesting. It's one of, from the early stages, one of the equal parallel challenges of it. You've got this interesting idea, but you're starting from the ground, working forwards. At the beginning, I was working on PhD and teaching design at UCL. And slowly started on this as a kind of parallel. At the time I was working, I'm very interested in material performance and what is the sort of material strength limits, rather than working in a, over-insulated zone, saying what can things really do? And perhaps that's what leads to going on to do inventions. But started working on that, started testing out ideas, originally 3D printing, trying to make the helmet. We got to the point where we could 3D print the helmet, worked on it for about 3 years, and then started to be looking at a Tetra Pak sort of drink pack and thinking, well, if you had like a kind of Kevlar, like ballistics grade fabric, but that type of system, that would be very similar to what we were doing with 3D printing. And then decided to go after that technology, really, and a long period forwards. And we've been very, very lucky to have the support of Innovate UK from an early stage. Innovate is a UK-based grant funding, if anybody is unfamiliar with it. Very exceptional for facilitating innovation and invention for commercialization, helping it get off the ground as a UK product, but also staying British-based rather than migrating. And I think that it's something around 10% or 5% or something, or sometimes 2% of applicants win. And we've been lucky enough now to have won 5 Innovate grants. But in the early stages, that was really quite helpful. And then in parallel, there was just, perhaps because of the activity itself of cycling, it's something that people seem to understand and identify with, and it doesn't take a lot to help people construct and understand the vision of where mobility is going and how convenience and getting around makes sense. And then the electric bike starts to come in, and of course the helmet has been you could say a pain point, I would say. What do you do with it as you're cruising around and going, or you stop for a drink with a friend or whatever it might be. And so we've just been really quite successful at always attracting a lot of private investment along the way. And, that starts with sort of smaller friends and family and then builds into, whatever kind of multi-million seeds rounds, getting it going. And now we're looking at doing a Series A larger raise to go more global with it. But in parallel to that, I think the other thing that's been really important and very interesting in the development is the development of the brand itself. It's just a personal, I think growing up, I wanted to make sports gear. I, grew up in a kind of hockey community and wanted to potentially make hockey stuff for Bauer or Nike or something, or shoes. This was but also was always making my own t-shirts and drawing on them and everything. And I think the idea of selling t-shirts kind of in high school and airbrush painting and things. And so this idea of the value and the contribution of brand to elevating, not desire from a sort of sales point of view, but I think we love living with an elevated sense of desire and aspiration and inspiration, and the desire to use brand to help to construct that for people, that it was something that in a way the product could aim to bring joy through the use, but also that the brand could be something. I always thought it's quite nice, when you find something really very interesting and you want to share it with a friend, or you post it online and reshare it. And this has been the focus for a long time of building that side out. I feel like if we're able to continue to do that more and more, the thing just becomes more fun, And so those two things in parallel, and we talk a lot about the brand internally as a kind of creative vehicle. And the reason why we talk about creative vehicle is that it's a moving thing. It's not static. The desire for us is not to make perfect imagery or something and have it out there and just exist as a complete thing. We want to sort of continue to test creative ideas as well too. You've got a sort of a product that takes a while to develop and iterate and further products, but then also you've got this brand that can try to connect with people through storytelling and things. And I think up to now it's been quite visually based, but also curious to move more into the storytelling. So I think for about 4 years, we've been building out the brand as well, which is probably non-typical. Most companies are kind of often in a product base. We've got a mix of where our team is mostly architects, engineers, and cyclists. And I think probably typically you would have less on the sort of design side and more on the just pure engineering side. But then I think you end up in a challenging situation where you've got a product, but you don't necessarily know how to move people's soul and really connect with people. And I think this is the thing that there's a real long long bit of nutrition and road for us in understanding that and trying things and testing. And it's nice with a helmet that, translates from 2D to 3D, because it's not just a sort of object like a perfume bottle that you're sort of trying to take a nice picture of, and you can't do much else than that. But the sort of various ways of contribution and elevation, I think from the brand side has been quite interesting. And to bring it back to your question about, how do you develop a kind of company evolution through this? Well, I thought it's, as brand is important in product elevation, I think it's also very important in company development. And so in all of our conversations, in all of our work, it's helping everybody to understand and to see, not putting forward the vision of trust. We'll try to get there. It's like we're always just trying to share the best version of where we're at this point, and people gravitate towards it much, much more quickly. And it's been very interesting because coming from an architecture background, many people that have gone on outside of architecture and done say business, and they've been incredibly successful because they tackle a challenge or a problem in a sort of different way than perhaps a linear manner that others within that new discipline would be attacking it. And so I've tried to take that approach within the development of the business and think, how can we make the business develop an interesting creative endeavor rather than a kind of problem or a hiccup against getting the thing done. And in doing that, just shifting that, it's made it, one, very, very fun, but it's allowed us to enter and operate in business in a way that I think probably a sort of any type of competitor would not be able to match. And it's been a little bit surprising in a way for us, I think, if we're being honest, but also it's very engaging because it continues to help you grow and trust your intuition and your confidence in pushing it out there and pushing it forwards, because quite quickly they're like, yeah, they perhaps even through words can't necessarily articulate why it is they want to sort of be around it and be a part of it, but they do. It resonates with them. And that's where I think the deep joy of spending 10 years on something starts to come through. It's an unusual experience or opportunity to get to spend 10 years developing a scenario. And a little side story that perhaps is interesting. I was doing architecture working in Norway for a very interesting office, Lars Bergi, a good friend of mine, and he had been at Snøhetta, which is a very well-known architecture office, always an inspiration to me, and he worked there for a number of years and then left, and they had just finished doing the Oslo Opera, and his good friend from the office took us for a tour just as it was opening, and he had spent 8 years working on the secondary performance hall. And he was just showing us everything. It's quite black box inside. The main one everyone knows is made by all the boat builders of Norway, and it's absolutely fantastic. The woodwork is just incredible. But you go into the secondary sort of stage, and it's quite typical. And he had spent 8 years working on it, and he was so proud of everything. And I was just standing there, and I was like, I got to get out of architecture. Can't spend 8 years on one thing. This is crazy. And was always had a lot of admiration towards areas like fashion and outerwear, where there are, a couple collections a year, and you're trying to put together sort of 28 looks twice a year, and that's a lot of pieces, and the creative output is very high versus spending 8 years on one room. But it was amazing seeing the pride, and at that point I was like, I don't know if architecture, the practice, is for me. And so it's a bit humorous to find yourself here sitting after 10 years, bringing this piece of development to the world. But at the same time, I think I have a sort of humorous mixed view on it now.
You look rightly proud of yourself, Colin. I think this is one of the best stories and one of the best products that we've had on the programme. Where do people get this? What do they pay for it? And what should they keep looking out for?
Best place to get it, I would say, is through our website at vontet.com, VENTET. The name comes as a sort of takeoff of a French translation of like wind and air and head, so Vontet. And then we're also starting now working with partnerships at top end, both cycle and outerwear retailers. We've been developing a relationship with Via Atelier. We were in the window there in June. I think we'll hopefully be for sale there soon. And then also other cycle shops globally. I think Cycle Project Store in Singapore, we're hoping to have as one of our first ones, a really interesting shop. And then a few other kind of premium areas around, both first in London and then moving out across the EU, and then next year looking at moving over to the US.
That was Colin Herberger, the co-founder and CEO of Vontet. You can find out more and pick up one for yourself or a loved one this Christmas by heading to vontet.com. You're listening to The Entrepreneurs. Now, we've got a very special guest with us in the studio. She's going to tell us all about the exciting offerings that Monocle have at this festive time of year. But first, let's hear what she's been up to. It's Holly Anderson. Holly, joining me in the studio in London from your new home, Paris. How are you settling in?
Oh, it's been amazing, Tom. I think 2025 is going to be an amazing year for Monocle and the expansion into France. And my Paris life is just as you would imagine. I'm living the Parisian dream and really absorbing the energy of the city. You know, post-Olympics, I think there's a lot going on, and we have settled into our little temporary office in Le Marais. We have exciting news that we're opening a cafe and a shop in Rue Bachemont in the 2nd arrondissement in February. All things well.
Well, exactly. There's always a few caveats, but there'll also be some radio facilities there as well. So people can expect to hear a great deal more from Paris over the Monocle Radio airwaves. But let's train our spotlight on print. Holly, of course, one of the things you look after is ensuring that all the wonderful things we make head out around the world and that more eyes are on the magazines and so forth. There's a bit of a kind of a program, an initiative, an idea about how we can help expand people's view. Tell us about what's in the frame for 2025.
So yeah, this Christmas, the campaign that we've centred around is send your loved ones around the world, give them a global perspective and expand their horizons. I think this really stays true to what Monocle is all about, improving how we live, how we work, ensuring that subscribers are up to date with all the latest trends and forecasts for the year ahead. So I think we want to ensure that all the subscribers know about how many events we've got coming up. This year we've done from Warsaw to Australia and obviously the Quality of Life conference in Istanbul. And for our subscribers next year, I think it's already been announced, but we are in Barcelona for the Quality of Life conference, and all subscribers get 10% discount on those tickets too. So I think that that's an extra incentive to sign up.
Now, Holly, I gather that's not the only delight concealed in that Christmas sack across your shoulder. There's a little incentive for our radio listeners, our great friends around the world, to get involved and subscribe. Maybe a couple of little extra incentives, inducements. Talk to me about what's on offer for our listeners.
Absolutely. So this year we wanted to add a little extra gift with your subscription to really help you plot and plan for the year ahead. So this year, radio listeners can get a Monocle 2025 diary.
Oh, this is exciting news for our listeners. Holly, what do they need to do to take advantage to get that special diary?
All you need to do is go to the website and type in monocle.com/radio24, and we will make sure your diary is winging its way to you.
What else is on the agenda for next year, Holly? I know you popped up in Cannes this week at the International Luxury Travel Market. It was really exciting. We heard lots of great interviews gathered for radio, lots of exciting deals and conversations in the frame from there. Anything on your personal hit list for next year? What about places you'd like to visit, perhaps? Not just to flog a load of magazines, but to expand your own worldview.
Yeah, I think what we did in Cannes was absolutely fantastic. The brand partnership side of things are really expanding. We will be popping up in MIPIM in March, and Andrew and Carlotta will be on the radio waves there.
Now, Holly, lots of our listeners will also know that Monocle still very much believes in bricks and mortar retail, of course. They'll know our shops around the world. Tell me a bit about the retail plan. Some of our shops have had a bit of a spruce up. This is always a great place for people to come and really engage face-to-face with their friends at Monocle.
Exactly. So we've gone through a refurb phase. So our London cafe has been refurbed, our Hong Kong shop, and Toronto too. So again, subscribers can benefit from a 10% off on all Monocle products in store and online. And obviously Paris is coming in 2025, so stay tuned.
That was Holly Anderson, Monocle's Circulation and Brand Partnerships Director. You can find out more and take advantage of that special offer by heading to monocle.com/radio24. And that's all for this episode of The Entrepreneurs. We'll be back at the same time next week. Do look out for Eureka, which is available every Friday. The programme was produced by Laura Kramer with audio editing by Jack Dewars. Listen again and find out more about the show at monocle.com. That's where you can also subscribe to Monocle magazine, as just mentioned, and read more about better businesses every month. You can follow us and browse the archive wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with the team, do write to Laura on lrk@monocle.com. I'm Tom Edwards. Goodbye, and thanks for listening to The Entrepreneurs. BNP Paribas Wealth Management is proud to partner with The Entrepreneurs on Monocle Radio. Confronted by complexity, you need a financial partner you can trust that will protect your assets and strive to meet your expectations. BNP Paribas Wealth Management is the bank for entrepreneurs in a changing world. Head to wealthmanagement.bnpparibas now for guidance on starting your journey.